Good evening and welcome to the Week in Review. I'm Paris Schutz. We'll be joined by our Week in Review guests in just a moment, but first, some of today's top stories. A last-minute change of course. The mask mandate for Illinois schools will officially end on Monday when the mandate is lifted for the rest of the state. Governor Pritzker announced the move today, keeping in step with new Centers for Disease Control guidance. This comes as the Illinois Supreme Court declined to hear Pritzker's challenge to a lower court ruling against the mandate, while also lifting a temporary restraining order set by the lower court decision. Governor Pritzker says he interprets this to mean he still has the executive authority to issue a similar mask order if needed down the road. Now, many school districts have already gone mask optional. A mask mandate is still in place for Chicago public schools per a labor agreement CPS has struck with the Chicago Teachers Union. Illinois U.S. Senator Dick Durbin promises a swift Supreme Court confirmation process for D.C. Appellate Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson. Jackson is President Joe Biden's pick to replace outgoing Justice Stephen Breyer on the High Court. Durbin is chair of the Senate Judiciary Committee and will lead the confirmation process. He says he has already reached out to his Republican counterparts on the committee. If confirmed, Jackson would become the first African-American woman on the High Court.
She's an extraordinary person in terms of her life story and her professional qualifications to serve on the court. She has published over 500 opinions as a judge, so her record is well known and well established. And she's appeared before the committee, as I mentioned, for questioning, direct questioning last year, and she was approved with a bipartisan roll call. We are going to start the formal investigation of this nominee today. We are hoping to move her to a hearing soon, within the next several weeks, and then report that to the Senate floor as soon as possible.
And Durbin made the comments today while speaking at the Ukrainian Cultural Center in Chicago. He met with community members and pledged temporary protection status for the U.S. for Ukrainian asylum seekers. And President Biden today announced direct sanctions on Russian President Vladimir Putin, which Durbin said he was in favor of. Former Bears head coach Matt Nagy has new employment. Nagy will join the Kansas City Chiefs, his old team, as quarterbacks coach and senior assistant. It reunites Nagy with his mentor, Kansas City Chiefs head coach Andy Reid. Nagy was fired this year after a 6-11 season and 4 years leading the Bears, including 2 playoff appearances, but no playoff victories. And now to our Week in Review panel. Joining us are Taylor Avery of the Chicago Sun-Times, Greg Pratt of the Chicago Tribune, Mike Lowe of WGN-TV News, and Clarence Page of the Chicago Tribune. We thank you all for joining us, and let's get right to it with the news in Ukraine. Mike Lowe, President Biden announces direct sanctions on Russian President Putin today, following course with what the EU is doing. Does anyone anticipate this would have any deterrence impact at all?
Well, there's probably not going to be a deterrent impact, but eventually this will hit him where it hurts, in the pocketbook. These are intended to go directly at him personally and a few members of the senior leadership in Russia. There's some thought that, well, what good do sanctions do when, you hear check back with me in a month? But when there's a war being waged right now and bombs are falling. But this is part of what the president has said, that the United States will not be engaged in a conflict with Russia in Ukraine. Now, that will all change, of course, if by design or by misstep, the war spills into NATO territory. But right now, really the only thing the United States can do is provide assistance through defense aid to the Ukraine forces and to impose these sanctions. And they still have a couple of cards left to play in terms of sanctions, but this was one of the most strict moves that the United States could make.
And Clarence Page, this happens as the latest reporting out of Ukraine is that the capital city of Kiev could fall any hour, any day now. In Washington, is it a tragic fait accompli here that the sacking of the capital by the Russians is eventually going to happen?
Well, that is not quite a fait accompli, but it's understandable considering how outnumbered and outgunned the Ukrainians are compared to the Russian army. The one thing working in their favor is the Ukrainian people. They have been through invasion before. They are a resilient country of people who are expected to possibly render some surprises to President Putin. Now, I don't want to sound too optimistic or even generate more unfounded rumors, but early intelligence said that the Russians would have gotten into Kyiv by now. So there are some indications that the resistance is to some degree holding them back. And I always remember that the Ukrainians have had democracy for 20 years. The Russians haven't really had much at all. The Ukrainians appreciate the value of self-governance and resistance to the Russians have a long, long history. So I don't want to say that's just the fait accompli.
And indeed, the president of Ukraine, Zelensky, still in Kiev, vowing to keep fighting. Mike Lowe, you spoke with some Ukrainian Americans in Chicago, and it's a robust population here in Chicago. What were they telling you?
Everyone's concerned. These are people who have family members who are in Ukraine. In fact, last night we got some video into the WGN newsroom from a woman who has a cousin here in Chicago, and she was furiously trying to get to a bomb shelter. The pictures we're seeing are just heartbreaking of fathers telling their families, goodbye, and that they're going to take up arms today. We had this kind of harrowing bulletin come across saying that the Ukraine government has passed out some 18,000 machine guns to citizens in order to defend the capital, and they're telling people to make Molotov cocktails if they have to defend the capital against Russian forces. So, as you said, this reverberates around the world, and certainly here in Chicago, where there is a large Ukrainian American population, a number of people who have family members directly affected by this.
It certainly reverberates politically. Greg Pratt, all members of the Illinois congressional delegation have strongly condemned Putin, except for one, a downstate Republican, Mary Miller, who had more tepid statements and offered more blame to U.S. President Biden. Is the GOP fractured on their opposition here?
Yeah, probably. They're beholden to President Trump in a lot of ways, and President Trump says all sorts of weird things about Putin that goes against the foreign policy establishment, and so there's an element of that.
And Greg Pratt, I'm told you have some ties to the situation as well. Explain that for us.
Well, friends, family, girlfriend with Ukrainian ties, so it's really unfortunate to see, because you have these people who are very resilient and they're very tough, and they're living their lives, and up until recently they were trying to maintain calm and order, and now they're in a position where they're being invaded and they're trying to repel the invaders. And what Russia should be concerned about, I would be concerned about if I was Russia, is an insurgency. And what happens when you try to quash people, and are they going to say, okay, well, these people are here, so we're going to live with that? As we found out in Iraq, and as countries have been finding out throughout history, it's not that easy.
Certainly the open question. What happens, indeed, if that does happen? Greg Pratt. Clarence Page, what do you think the reverberations are going to be back here in the United States, whatever happens, either economically, politically, anything?
Well, they're already happening. I want to add, by the way, the Ukrainian community is deeply rooted in Chicago. About 50,000 people at the last count I saw, those who identify as Ukrainian. And there are so many who are in prominent positions. I just had to just Google up Ukrainian Americans. I think you'll be quite surprised by how prominent they are. Mike Royko, my journalistic idol, was half Ukrainian. Mike Ditka, the Chicago Bears hero, Ukrainian. Mila Kunis, the lovely actor. Leonard Nimoy, Mr. Spock, is half Ukrainian. I mean, you can go on and on. And they have a real place in the American crazy quilt. And they are very much proud of their background, but they are also very much well-assimilated Americans who are making themselves heard Dick Durbin has called for tougher sanctions, by the way, against Ukraine. I think you're going to see that kind of call coming from a lot of people.
And you saw Illinois Republican Congressman Adam Kinzinger today calling for some NATO action. I'm sorry, someone wanted to jump in here?
Sorry, Taylor. And
Taylor,
I think
go ahead.
Else, yeah, sorry, when we're talking about back at home, how this may affect the U.S., Russia's attack on Ukraine has already pushed the price of oil to over $100 a barrel, which is the first time that's happened since 2014. And also Russia produces about, I think like 12% of the world's oil and 17% of its natural gas, which makes it the second or third highest producer. So I think there's a lot of questions in the U.S. of how this is going to affect already high gas prices with how the inflation is at this point.
And certainly President Biden has addressed that, saying that he wanted to look for ways to mitigate the coming pain at the pump that is expected. Taylor Avery, let's come back local. As we mentioned, the mask mandate in Illinois and in Chicago is going to lift on Monday. Is the state ready for this?
I think there's a lot of questions about whether the state is ready for this. Pritzker has said that, and according to the CDC's newest guidance, much of the state falls within, these new levels that show that the state is ready to not have masks worn with, I think, hospital levels and current transmission rates.
And you saw the state Supreme Court ruling just late this evening. Taylor, does that mean that is it officially for any school mask mandates, and all districts can go optional now if they want?
Currently, I think there's no legal standing to have mask mandates except for local school districts. But I think Pritzker has said that he is intending to still push to have the mask mandate or the ability to have a mask mandate through executive order. But we'll see how that plays out in the lower court.
And basically he's saying, should cases rise again, he believes he still has that executive authority to reinstitute a mask mandate. Back here in Chicago, Greg Pratt, an arbitrator handed Mayor Lori Lightfoot a big victory in this ongoing battle with the FOP, saying that the FOP does need to comply with the city's vax mandate or uploading their vax status to the portal. Explain the arbitrator's decision.
Well, the mayor said we were going to make a rule that you guys need to get vaccinated, and if you don't, you can't work here. And the union said, no, they don't have the right to make that rule. The arbitrator said, yeah, they do. And so now they're going to have to get vaccinated. And that was one of the happiest walks the mayor has done into a city council press room in quite a while. She was very pleased with the decision, and she's very excited because the political moment right now is pro-vaccine, it's anti-mask. Yeah, it's why you see governors, starting with the governor of New Jersey, Democratic governors taking this wave against masks, and now it's going. And, you just got to hope that it doesn't lead to a spike. But people are pretty tired of COVID right now. And what that says about us, I don't know. But people are tired, and they're ready to get back to some sort of normalcy.
Mike Lowe, as I understand right now, there's still about a quarter of the police department that is not complying. The FOP president, John Catanzara, is still saying hold the line, although it does look like he's out of legal options here. So what do you think happens? Is the city just going to stop paying thousands of police officers, or are they going to start to comply?
Well, it was about 2,800 officers out of more than 11,000 or 12,000 that still have yet to enter their information into the city portal. And the mayor was asked at that news conference what the FOP should do. And she was asked specifically, should they simply lay down their swords and accept that this is a loss for their cause? And the mayor essentially said, I have no idea, and I would never try to predict what the FOP would do. Later, John Catanzara said that what the court ruling basically affirmed in his mind is that Chicago is being ruled by a dictator. So he says he's going to hold the line. I think it's going to be kind of a staring contest almost to see who blinks. Remember, these are officers who have families, who don't want to see their livelihoods go down the drain, and they fought the fight. They lost. I believe that most of them will concede that and try to get the vaccine and get their information. There may be a few holdouts, but I don't think it's likely that we'll see 3,000, 2,800 officers or whatever the number is right now walk away from their jobs over this, even though they may not like it. They fought and they lost.
And Clarence Page, this comes as the Centers for Disease Control revised their indoor masking guidance. Greg Pratt brought up the scenario that Democratic governors like Governor Pritzker are doing away with the mask mandate. Is there political pressure on this decision as midterms approach and Democrats see their polling not doing so well?
Political pressure in Chicago, I'm shocked, just shocked. But the fact is, yes, there is all across the country because people are suffering COVID fatigue, mask fatigue. They're tired of the rules and all of this. Mostly, I'd say the strongest element are parents who, along with their kids, have gone through a lot. And they feel like, when's it all going to end? And they can see evidence around them that it's not as serious as it used to be. So everybody's very impatient. So the politicians eventually respond to that, whereas the medical personnel, bless their hearts, they are knowledgeable scholars. They want to be extra careful. So we got to hit some happy balance in between. And that's where democracy has to work.
Certainly probably a little bit of tug-of-war there. All right, let's move to some city council news. Council did not vote on the mayor's controversial gang asset forfeiture ordinance this week. Take a look at what the mayor said about opposition to her proposal.
And so sympathy for people who are literally spilling blood on our streets every single day is, quite frankly, hard for me to understand or fathom. And the notion that somehow this ordinance won't make a difference, or I've also heard that it's going to make matters worse. Tell that to the people living in neighborhoods that they are terrified to come out of their homes, live a normal life because they are afraid of gang violence.
Greg Pratt, it's really unusual for an ordinance to pass a city council committee and then not garner the votes to pass city council. This delay here means that it's not going to be voted on, but does it effectively mean she does not have the votes and it's DOA for good?
No, I don't think it's DOA for good, but they didn't feel confident that they had the votes on that day. I think that there's a pretty decent chance that they will get the votes together, probably narrowly, because the political moment is about crime and people are concerned about crime. And even though there is very real reason to be skeptical that this will have a significant effect on crime, it's going to be hard for a lot of these aldermen to justify when everything's going on, when people say, hey, well, why didn't you vote for this and that? But it's going to be very close, but I wouldn't count the mayor out on this one.
And there was opposition across the spectrum from civil rights groups, civil liberties groups, and the FOP and John Catanzaro for different reasons. All right, let's go to a tense personal exchange that happened down in Springfield between two lawmakers over masking up in the General Assembly. Taylor Avery, tell us who they are and what exactly went on.
So last week, Representative Lakeisha Collins introduced a resolution to remove 9 Republican House members who were refusing to wear a mask. And when she did so, she named Representative Stephen Reich, who was later removed from the resolution that got voted on and had those 9 members removed. But he was offended by being named in that. And so, after the session was over, he went up to Representative Collins and reportedly stuck his finger in her face and said, keep my name out of your mouth. And so he came and tried to apologize to her about 10 minutes after it happened, but she wasn't ready to receive that apology. And after another representative sent a letter to Representative Reich, he apologized publicly on the floor on Tuesday after Representative Collins had this very, very difficult speech about how his actions towards her triggered her to a very difficult past that she's experienced. And then right after that, they voted to remove 3 Republican members, 2 of which had been removed the week before for, still flaunting the mask requirement in the House.
A lot of bitterness there, and I think there was an expletive in that exchange. We appreciate you withholding that from this program. But Taylor, so Monday, when the state mask mandate lifts, does that mean the General Assembly's mask mandate is going to lift, or is that going to keep going?
There hasn't really been any news on that so far. And I think a lot of the representatives are, not representative, but, representative senators, everyone in the building is waiting to hear. So no word yet, but I'm sure that there will be a lot of pressure to remove that, especially when there's been, the whole state won't be wearing, well, not the entire state, but most of the state won't be wearing masks indoors on Monday.
Right, save for certain organizations and CPS, as we mentioned. All right, Mike Lowe, let's move to another federal case. We're talking about a federal case involving a politician every week, but this one is State Senator Tom Cullerton. He resigns his seat. He is pleading guilty to embezzlement here. Remind us who he is and the circumstances of this case.
He is a member of one of the foremost political dynasties in Illinois, state senator who, as you mentioned, was charged with embezzling. He decided to plead guilty to those charges, and because of that, had to resign his seat immediately. This is an interesting case, also because it comes on the heels of another political dynasty that has fallen in this kind of corruption, this renewed sense of going after corruption in politics in Illinois. Patrick Daley Thompson was just convicted of cheating on his taxes and then lying about it to federal agents. So we're seeing a real kind of clamping down on this kind of corrupt activity, and Cullerton has pleaded guilty.
Right, you mentioned 2 dynasties in 2 weeks with certain members of those dynasties. All right, let's take it out back. National President Biden nominated Ketanji Brown Jackson to the Supreme Court today. Here is what she said about her historic nomination.
If I am fortunate enough to be confirmed as the next Associate Justice of the Supreme Court of the United States, I can only hope that my life and career, my love of this country and the Constitution, and my commitment to upholding the rule of law and the sacred principles upon which this great nation was founded will inspire future generations of Americans.
And Clarence Page, as we mentioned earlier in the show, it is Illinois Senator Dick Durbin's job to shuttle her through the confirmation process. Do you expect a bumpy road ahead or a swift confirmation?
I expect resistance from the usual suspects who are starting to speak out already. Conservative, and I mean really conservative Republicans who want to block any Biden appointment. Already you're hearing this is going to be a token appointee. Ever since Biden said he was looking for a black woman, as if that's some kind of a crime now after a history of no black women on the high court. Ketanji Brown is a very impressive woman. I haven't known her before she was nominated, but everything I hear about her and see about her tells me the Republicans better be careful. They may just overdo it the way Democrats did going after Kavanaugh, and they wind up costing them in the next midterm.
And there have been some statements from Republicans signaling that perhaps it won't be as contentious as the Kavanaugh hearing, but they do intend to do their due diligence. Let's come back local. Greg Pratt, in the Secretary of State's race, Alexi Janulius had been sweeping up the endorsements until Jesse White, the current longtime Secretary of State, endorsed City Clerk Ana Valencia, and then Governor Pritzker followed suit. Does this make her the front runner in your eyes?
Well, she's certainly not the front runner, but she's not dead in the water anymore either. You know, she survived the onslaught of Alexi trying to crowd her out and clear the field and bully her out by announcing every endorsement that he can. And that didn't work. She stuck around. The thing about politics is you see a lot of endorsements get bandied around, and most of the time they don't mean a dang thing. But in this case, Jesse White is a very significant endorser for his own position. And so she has some new life and some new energy, and whether she's able to capitalize on it is unclear. You know, Alexi still has more money, which is also important. You know, that's the more impressive part of his arsenal than his endorsements, which, whatever. But he's got like 4 times as much money as she does. But if she can start closing that gap and Jesse White helps her with a key constituency and with his supporters and his popularity, it's a real race.
And maybe those endorsements bring more money. All right, we only have a few seconds left, but Taylor Avery, Tom DeVore, a downstate lawyer who took Pritzker to court over these mandates, now running for Attorney General in the Republican primary. A little bit more about him.
Yeah, so he actually was originally or previously running for judge in the state's 5th Appellate District Court before switching races, which he did and he announced it on Facebook on Monday night. And so he'll be up against the international business attorney Steve Kim for the GOP nomination. And Kim is a part of this, the slate of statewide candidates. And he's the one who's behind this lawsuit that we just saw in the Supreme Court.
The lawsuit that Pritzker took to the Supreme Court. All right. Well, we are out of time, so our thanks to Taylor Avery, Greg Pratt, Mike Lowe, and Clarence Page. And that is our show for this Friday night. Join us again next week for Chicago Tonight, all week. And now for the Week in Review, I'm Paris Schutz. Thank you so much for watching. Stay healthy and safe, and have a great weekend.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford.